Hello, my name's Geoff, and I have a question for you. If you could choose one good thing for yourself or for someone you love, what would it be? Plenty of money, so that financial worries would be a thing of the past? Good health and a long life, perhaps? Or maybe you would choose power and worldwide fame, so that you would be remembered long into the future. I wonder whether instead of any of these things, you considered choosing wisdom. In the Bible, there's the story of a young king of Israel called Solomon, who chose just that, wisdom. His choice so pleased God that he gave Solomon not only the wisdom which he asked for, but also the health, wealth, fame, and long life that he did not ask for. I think that the world would be in a better state if more of its leaders prized wisdom above those other things, desirable though they may be. But what is wisdom? One dictionary defines it as the ability to think and act utilizing knowledge, experience, understanding, common sense, and insight. That sounds reasonable enough, and I have no quarrel with it as far as it goes. It does, however, miss out what the Bible considers the most important element, namely the acknowledgement of God as the source of wisdom and the ultimate goal of any worthwhile human activity. One of the Bible's proverbs says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." A foolish person is the opposite of one who is wise. In the Bible, that means first and foremost someone who ignores God. As Psalm 14 verse 1 says, "The fool says in his heart, 'There is no God.'" The wise person, by contrast, begins by acknowledging God's existence and holding him in awe and reverence, which is what that phrase, "the fear of the Lord," really means. So it's possible for someone to be wise according to our dictionary definition, that is, to have the ability to think and act utilizing knowledge, experience, understanding, common sense, and insight, and yet to be foolish in God's eyes. They may be worldly wise, but not spiritually wise. If what the Bible tells us about God is true, then to live without reference to Him is to base our thoughts and actions on a faulty foundation. Our worldview will not match up to how things really are, and sooner or later we shall run into trouble. One danger with merely natural gifts of knowledge and wisdom is that they can lead us into pride and arrogance. We may come to think that we are the masters of our own destiny, that we are fully in control of our lives, and maybe those of other people too, if we are in positions of power and influence. We have then reached a point where worldly wisdom and power stand opposed to the true wisdom, which would lead us humbly to recognize our dependence on God. We may even come to despise those who do trust in God as foolish and weak. The Apostle Paul had some hard-hitting things to say about this when he wrote to the Christians in Corinth. For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. The first thing Paul says is that the world does not know God through its own wisdom. By our own efforts, we cannot come to know God. We cannot enter into a relationship with him. For that, it's necessary for him to reveal himself to us. And this is the message of the Bible from beginning to end. This self-revelation by God finds its focus in the person and work of his Son, Jesus Christ. It's the good news about him that the apostles preach to the world, and which we must believe if we are to be saved from our ignorance and separation from God. Paul goes on to nail his message firmly to the cross of Christ. We preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God, and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than man's wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than man's strength. If we would know God at all, then we must do so on his terms. There is no other way. We cannot climb up to heaven where he dwells. So he comes down to us in the person of his Son. And not only did Jesus show us what God is like in his words and actions, he did so supremely in his death on the cross, where he willingly gave his life to bring us back to God. That is why Christ crucified is central to the good news which Paul and the other apostles proclaimed. To some people, this may look like the ultimate demonstration of powerlessness and defeat, rather than the decisive victory over evil. And to others it makes no sense at all. It is simply nonsense or folly. But Paul tells us that God's foolishness is wiser than our wisdom, and his weakness stronger than our strength. We must each make our choice how we respond to this message. Will we rely on our own abilities, or will we put our trust in what God has done for us in Christ? The stakes could not be higher. Worldly wisdom, or the wisdom that comes from God? The choice is yours.